Hi there, designers. I am Holly Skog. I am the owner of Happy Book Solutions, where we demystify the finance side of your interior design business. Today, we are chatting 1099s, which means we're also chatting W9s, which means we are also chatting how to prep for the filing deadline in January. So stay tuned for answers to all of those questions. We want to make sure that you feel prepared. You are not caught off guard by the January 31st filing deadline, and that you feel confident which W-9s you need to collect, how to file 1099s, all of those good, exciting things. We've got answers for you coming right up. I think the most important place to start this conversation is, what are 1099s to begin with? And the answer to that is that it is a form that you use to report to the IRS what you have paid to vendors who meet certain criteria. And we'll get into what those criteria are in just a little bit here, but essentially it's, hey IRS, I paid vendor XYZ this amount of money in the last calendar year. That's the purpose of Form 1099. Now, the two main types of 1099s that you are probably going to encounter are the 1099 NESC. It stands for non-employee compensation. This is what people think of when they talk about a 1099 contractor. When you're talking about a 1099 contractor, you are referencing Form 1099 NEC. But the thing about it is that a lot of designers think if they don't have a 1099 contractor, that therefore they do not need to file for 1099 forms. And that is actually unlikely. You probably do still have vendors that qualify for 1099 forms. And like I said, we'll get into that criteria in a little bit here, but I do just want your ears to perk up and think, this might be applicable to my business. The other 1099 form that you are possibly going to run into is the Form 1099 MISC, and that is for a whole host of many things. The main one that you may use it for is to report rents paid to a vendor who meets certain criteria. So rents being office space, storage space, possibly if you're renting a venue for some type of event. Vendors who meet certain criteria still need to receive a 1099 MISC for any rental income. So that's mainly what designers will use it for. However, interestingly, there is a spot for if you are selling fish for resale. So if you've got, like a little arm of your business that resells fish, just be aware that there's a spot to report that. For the purpose of this video, we are going to stick with talking about the Form 1099 NEC, non-employee compensation, the one that most designers think of when they're talking about 1099s. And that the reason for that is because that is the most prevalent, the one that is most likely to be used in your business. So just be aware of that going forward. We're talking about 1099 NEC. Okay, so next we're going to talk criteria. What criteria make a vendor eligible for receiving a 1099? And what I want you to do, this is going to be a helpful exercise. What I want you to do is print out a list if you can, or make a list from your brain. Take a look at your bank statements or take a look at your accounting software. You need a list of vendors, the amount that you've paid them, and the payment method. And so if you have that list, here's what you're going to do. You're going to go through and determine which vendors you paid for services. So if you paid for renderings, if you paid for administrative assistance, if you paid for web design, anything that is services, you are going to want to circle. Anything else you can cross out. If you paid a vendor for product, if you paid a vendor for office supplies, anything like that, you can cross those out. You just want to keep the ones that you have paid for services. The next vendors you can cross out are anybody that you have paid less than $600 to in the tax filing year. So if we're talking about 2024, anybody in 2024 that you have paid less than $600, you can go ahead and cross them out. So far we have vendors that you've paid for services, and vendors that you've paid $600 or more in the tax filing year. Next thing you're going to do is take a look at the payment method. So you can cross out anybody that you've paid by credit card, that you've paid via PayPal. The ones you're going to want to keep: anybody that you've paid via cash, check, ACH, wire transfer, bank-to-bank transfer like Zelle, direct deposit, that's another one. Anybody that you've paid via those methods, those you're going to keep. Anybody that you've paid any other way, you can go ahead and cross. So mostly like credit card or PayPal type payments. Go ahead and cross those out. All right, so the next set of vendors that you're going to cross off, you probably won't be able to do without receiving more information from the vendor. But if somehow you just happen to know anybody who is incorporated, what I mean by that is that their business structure is taxed as a corporation, you can go ahead and cross those people off. But let me tell you in just a minute how to determine whether or not a business is incorporated. So just to review, the list of eligible vendors that you are currently working with are vendors that you've paid for services for $600 or more. You paid them via cash, check, ACH, wire transfer, direct deposit, bank-to-bank transfer like Zelle, and you know that they are not taxed as a corporation. All four of those criteria should be true of the vendors that are on your list for 1099 eligibility. Let's chat how to get the information about their business structure. This is where W9s come in. W9s give you all the information that is necessary to finish the determination of whether or not you need to file a Form 1099 for that vendor, and they give you all the information that you need to actually do the filing of the 1099. The W9, it will include the vendor's name, whether that's their personal name and or their business name. It'll depend on their business structure, which one you're going to be using, but information is found on their W9. It will also include their business structure, which is what we were just talking about. You're going to need to look at that to make the final determination as to whether or not they are eligible for their 1099. If they have a corporation checked off on their W9, that is going to be the signal to you that they do not need to have a 1099 filed for them. That said, unless this is a lawyer we're talking about to whom you paid for legal services. And most importantly, their W9 is also going to show their tax ID number. So that is the number that you will be using to file their 1099, and the IRS will know which vendor you're talking about. The next question that I get from a lot of people is, how do I even go about collecting their W9? Right? And the thing I always tell people is that, first of all, you're working with freelancers, you're working with individuals who are providing services to businesses, and therefore they should be accustomed to receiving requests for their W9. So do not be afraid to reach out for somebody's W9 because it's probably a request that they've received in the past. Hopefully they've received it in the past, because otherwise the people that they're working with are not doing their job. Best practice that we normally will request our clients to do is to ask for a W9 before sending your initial payment for services. So if there's a service provider that you are working with and you got their invoice and you are ready to pay it, before you pay it, say, hey, I would love to pay this, and I'll get it paid right away once you send me your W9. That is the best practice, because otherwise you are going to be in the boat that many people are in, where they're getting towards the end of the year, or maybe it's January 30th and you know that the 1099 filing deadline is tomorrow, and you're like, shoot, I don't have any of the W9s that I need, and now I need to go and request all these W9s from my vendors, and I am in a bind. We don't want you to be there. So instead, you can say respectfully, hey, I need your W9. please send it to me so that I can pay you. You don't have to do it that way, but it's best practice. And again, your vendors should not be strangers to providing W9. If you would like a little more guidance on some of the language to use or the timing to use, you can head over to Happy Book Solutions on Instagram at happy.books.solutions. And we have a whole post going through how to expertly, confidently request W9s from your vendors. So you can go ahead and check that out on Instagram. One disclaimer I'm going to insert right here is that there are a lot of designers out there who feel so overwhelmed by 1099s, and I totally get it. I 100% get it. But because they're so overwhelmed, a lot of times they will just ignore 1099s that need to be filed. And I just want to warn you against that, because you are opening yourself up to some pretty significant fines and penalties if it is discovered that you did not file 1099s that you were supposed to file. So once you understand and have experienced filing 1099s, collecting W9s, I promise it's going to be not too overwhelming. But I want to encourage you to dig in, to understand, and to do what needs to be done in your business for the good of your business, for the good of your personal assets, for the good of your employees, for the sake of everybody involved. Do not open yourself up needlessly to fines and penalties. Okay, so then when it comes to the practicalities of actually filing the 1099s, you've done all the work, you've determined the vendors that need the 1099s filed, you have gone through the portion of the video that talks about crossing out the vendors, and you finalized your vendor list. You're like, well, now what the heck do I even do? How do I do this? We really like using a tool called Avalara 1099. It used to be called Track 1099. I think they acquired Track 1099 this year or something, but there are all kinds of methods to actually do the filing, but we really enjoy using Avalara 1099 in our business. I can link it below. We don't have any partnership or anything with them. I just am plugging what we normally do because it's worked out really well for our business. The thing we really enjoy about using a tool like Avalara 1099 is that it walks you through step by step the process of everything that you need, and it handles the e-filing, it handles emailing your vendors or mailing 1099 to your vendors. It just makes it really convenient. And the fees, at least to me, the fees are reasonable. So big fan. Avalara 1099, you can even do it directly through QuickBooks. There's a whole bunch of methods that work well, but like I said, we mostly have experience with Avalara 1099. We've reached the pop quiz portion of this video. We're going to go through specific examples, and you are going to play along and tell me whether or not we need to either collect a W9 or file a 1099 for this vendor. Okay? Are you ready? Did you expect a pop quiz? That's what makes it a pop quiz. You didn't expect it. Let's get into it. Okay, this scenario. Your web designer sends you an invoice for $2,000 worth of website edits, and you plan to pay with a check. Should you collect a W9? I'm waiting patiently for you to tell me. The answer here is yes. And you want to know why? It's because you're paying for more than $600 of services, and because you are paying via check, that is a payment method that falls under the criteria of 1099 eligibility. Now you get bonus points if you remember to ask for the W9 before you even cut the check or send the check to them. So then remember, what do? We receive the W9, we determine whether or not the vendor is incorporated. If the vendor is incorporated, we say, all right, great, we don't need to file a 1099. If they've got sole proprietor checked off on their W9, you say, sounds good, I will be filing a 1099 before January 31st. Okay, next scenario, a freelance designer, right? They send you an $800 bill for renderings, and you pay the bill via credit card. Do you collect a W9? The answer here is no, you do not need to collect a W9. Do you know why? Because you've paid via credit card. Credit card is not on the list of 1099 eligibility, right? Remember what the criteria are? Cash, check, ACH, bank-to-bank transfer, wire transfer, direct deposit. Those are all the criteria. Credit card is not on there, so you do not need to file a 1099, and that means you do not need a W-9. Next scenario, you Zelle your friend $700 because they did some one-time office work for you. Do you collect a W-9? Yes. You know why? Because it's more than $600 worth of services, and it's paid via bank-to-bank transfer. That's Zelle. It's bank-to-bank transfer. So you want a W-9, and presuming that your friend is, because she's doing some one-time office work, she probably isn't incorporated, but you will determine that once you get the W-9. And so this is somebody that is likely going to need to receive or have a 1099 filed with their business. Next scenario, you Zelle your friend $700. Last time you Zelled her for some one-time office work. This time you are Zelling her $700 for vintage furniture that she sold you. Do you request a W-9? No, you do not. Do you know why? It's because you purchased product from her. Last time she provided you services. This time she's providing you product. So you do not need to request a W-9 or then file a 1099 for that scenario. Okay, so now we're getting to the big leagues. All right, this is extra difficult. You write a check to your cabinet guy. The check is for labor and materials on a client's custom cabinets. Do you collect a W-9 on this? This is complicated because the answer is yes if labor is itemized and is for more than $600, or if everything, both their labor and materials, are rolled into one line item and the total invoice is greater than $600. If either the invoice is less than $600, or if labor and materials are itemized on the invoice, so we've got labor on one line, materials on the other line, and labor is less than $600, then you do not need a W-9 because 1099 isn't necessary. So those are just some examples. If there is a situation that you have that you don't feel like has been covered by those examples, you're still maybe confused after watching this video, drop it in the comments below because I will monitor them and I will be happy to answer any questions, any information that I missed. I want your life to be made easier because you watched this video. And if you watched this video and your life is still a little bit confusing, please comment below and I will see if I can make your life less confusing in the 1099 and W-9. So now we've reached the portion of the video with rapid fire FAQs. First one, what if I miss the filing deadline? If it is February 1st or later and you're like, shoot, I totally forgot to file my 1099s, go ahead and file them still. Technically speaking, you do open yourself up to penalties and interest, but the penalties and interest rack up as time goes on, and so the sooner that you can file those 1099s, the less likely you are to open yourself up to significant penalties. To be really honest with you, I've never experienced anybody filing late and actually having penalties assessed against them, so I would say don't be afraid to file late, but file as soon as you possibly can. Second rapid fire FAQ. What happens if my vendor refuses to send me a W-9? Well, hopefully you've requested the W-9 ahead of giving them payment, and therefore you can hold their payment hostage until they give you a W-9, in which case you just don't pay them and you wait for their W-9. They're legally obligated to give you a W-9, and so you won't get in trouble for withholding their payment if they refuse to give you a W-9. If you've already paid them and they still refuse to give you a W-9, technically speaking, you are required to withhold 4% of their payment as backup withholding for benefit of the IRS. I know it's super annoying, it's not ideal, but the thing is they owe you a W-9. You got to make sure that they give it to you. And if not, they technically get punished. Next question. What if I paid a vendor using a mix of payment methods? Say one invoice I sent them a check and one invoice I paid via credit card. In that case, you can disregard the credit card payment and only add up the ones that have been paid via the eligible payment methods. If the eligible payment methods add up to $600 or more, then you request a W-9, file a 1099. If they don't, then no big deal. Do I need to file a 1099 if the vendor did not hit $600? The answer is no, you do not need to file a 1099. Technically you can. It's not a big deal if you do. You are reporting that you paid your vendor whatever you paid them for the year to the IRS, but you are not required to file a 1099 for anything less than $600. How often do I need to collect a W-9? The answer is that W-9s never expire, so you don't technically need to request a new 1099s ever, unless their business address changes, unless their entity type changes or their taxation status changes. But hopefully those are going to be situations where they are proactively sending you a new W-9 rather than you having to ask every single year. So that one's up to you, but W-9s never expire. You are not required to ask for a new one every year. What if I'm working with international vendors? In that case, you're actually request a W8BEN form, W8BEN, instead of a W-9. 1099s are typically only for US-based vendors, and so therefore you don't need to collect a W-9 from non-US based vendors, typically. What if I made a mistake on a 1099? It happens. Mistakes happen. We're all human. All you got to do is just file a corrected form. It's a lot easier than it sounds, especially if you're using a tool like Avalara 1099. You just go ahead and file a corrected form, and no harm, no foul. All right, so that is 1099s and W-9. I know that it can be a lot, but I also promise that once you get into it, once you get familiar with the process of requesting W-9s and filing your 1099, understanding the vendors that do and do not need 1099s filed, it gets easier, I promise. And if there remains any confusion about anything, maybe you find yourself in a weird situation and you're not sure if you need to request a W-9, and you watch this video and you're just like, Holly, I'm still so confused, go ahead and drop a comment and I would be happy, more than happy, to answer any questions that you might have remaining. I hope that this 1099 season finds you well, and I also hope that this video has been helpful. Please help us out by subscribing if it has been, and we'll see you in the next video.